Welcome to Off the Wire, the podcast that helps you curb your cybersecurity risk and tackle technology challenges. I'm Tanner and I'm joined by Anthony. We're two IT executives with 35 years of experience. Let's start the show. Welcome back, everyone, to Off the Wire. Joined with Anthony, as always, and we also got a great guest for you. We're going to talk a little bit about low code, no code, all the different types of coding. And we brought a great guest to talk about that. This is Adam Wyke. He's a senior workflow engineer at Shift4. So, Adam, tell us a little bit about your background. Like, how did you get into low code and how did you kind of work your way from where you started to where you're at today?
Yeah, so fresh out of college, I worked at Blue Ridge Energy, which is an electric cooperative, and I worked on the help desk. And, after a year or so of that, somebody came into my office and they were like, "Hey, do you want to work on this new platform we have? It's a low code platform." And I had no clue what that was. And I was just like, "Yeah, sure, let me give it a go." And here we are 10 years later, and I'm still doing low code. So obviously, it kind of stuck with me. But yeah, I didn't have a whole lot of technical knowledge, being fresh out of college, just working on the help desk, doing password resets, things like that. But I hopped in there and, just kind of fell in love with it, honestly. Like, it's so cool as a non technical user, at least at the time, what I was able to do. I mean, anything and everything I could think of that somebody threw at me, for the most part, I was able to do it. So that's kind of where I started with low code. And then over the years, I just kept with it, kept in the space, and just even outside of work, I was diving into it. I was really fascinated with just all the cool things you can do without being a traditional developer. And my current job today is pretty much 24/7. I am doing low code. And that's the only thing I do all day long. And yeah, I love it.
So when I saw your title, like that actually made me super excited. I didn't even know those positions were out there. Are there more people that have that same job title where you work?
Yeah, so the department I work in, our focus is to look at business processes throughout the whole entire company. Shift4 is a fairly large company. We have, I think, 4,000 employees, lots of departments, things going on, and because of that, there's lots of areas for improvement. There's lots of legacy, software or just processes that are stuck in a spreadsheet. So yeah, there's actually, think here, there's 4 other employees with a similar title that do similar things as far as low code. So that's probably from what I understand, that's one of the bigger low code departments, if you want to call it that. But yeah, it's definitely, I feel like it's a new job title or it's a new thing. 10 years ago, I don't think you could have said, "Hey, I work in low code," and somebody would have really known what that meant. But nowadays, I think it's a lot more mature of a space. And I think there's a lot of opportunities out there because when I left Blue Ridge down to Florida and I had to get a new job, I was looking around and there's actually you go on LinkedIn, there's tons of low code jobs out there. They may not say low code developer, but there are all kinds of different business automation specialist or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's definitely, I think, more of a thing now than it was several years back.
I think if you look out and people might do research into different platforms, there's a lot of terminology out there. We've said low code, and maybe there's some listeners, some viewers out there that don't really know what low code means. So how does like regular coding, low coding, no coding, like how do you separate those? And like, why did low code, really resonate with you versus the others?
Yeah, so I would say there's 3 different levels. You have no code at the bottom there, and it is what it is. It's no code. You're not gonna have to go in there and write JavaScript or HTML or anything like that. That's the easiest to get started with, but I would say it's also the least configurable. So if you have like a complex project or something, you might be able to accomplish it in no code, but probably not. You're gonna have to move forward to maybe low code or traditional development. A good example of no code would be something like Airtable. You go into Airtable, and for those of you that don't know what Airtable is, it's basically like a spreadsheet on steroids, essentially. But you can also build user interfaces on top of it and things like that. For the most part, you can't do coding, but you go in there, you drag and drop, you build out your data, and that's kind of it. If you have some kind of complex user interface you want to build out, it's going to be a struggle to do that. So to achieve that, you move up to the next level, which is going to be low code. And that's the space that I really enjoy because there's less things that are going to block you from being able to complete your project. So with low code, you're still visually developing applications. You're doing things like dragging and dropping, creating forms, creating user portals, things like that. In some cases, maybe you need to do some really complex business logic. And typically, a platform is going to let you do something like you can throw in some JavaScript or maybe some HTML into that. So that's kind of the low code part of that. So it allows you to do more complex things, but with that comes a little bit more technical skills. You can't just take Betty Sue from accounting and throw her into a low code platform and she's just going to excel at it. And then finally, you're going to have like traditional development where everything's built from scratch. It absolutely will require a software developer that went to school for that, that's been doing that for years. That one, you have the most flexibility. You can build anything. So that's kind of the trade-off essentially as you go from no code to traditional development. It gets more complex technical wise and it's a little bit slower. No code is the easiest, but also the least configurable. Low code is going to allow you to do more complex things. And then traditional development is the most flexible, but also requires the most technical skills.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know there's been a push into smaller and smaller businesses. And we kind of think of development, especially maybe a traditional coding, is like a large enterprise kind of a thing. They're going to do that, and we're going to kind of buy the products that they make, right? As maybe small, medium sized businesses. But there's kind of like been a push and a more of a popularity for that to move further down in business size. Is it just the advent of like the low code, no code platforms that's really facilitated that? Is it just maybe the skill set has risen, maybe at those small, medium businesses? What's your kind of take on that?
I think small and medium businesses probably have the most to gain from low code simply because it's just the productivity boost. If you have 5 employees that are all doing manual work, but maybe you can automate a large chunk of that, those 5 employees might be like 10. They can go do things that they can let the automation do or something like that. So, you know, while it does benefit large businesses, I think the smaller ones definitely have the most to gain from it.
We were talking kind of pre-show and we were talking about some cool stuff that all three of our organizations have done. Is there like some project that you did in low code where you were like, man, this was really cool? Is there like some sort of, you know, thing that blew you away that you were able to complete with a low code platform?
Yeah, I can think of a couple examples. I mean, it's not always the flashy, cool stuff that gets me the most excited. It's the stuff that has the biggest impact, I guess. While I was at Blue Ridge, we developed an outage SMS texting automation workflow on the back end in the low code platform. I just thought it was amazing that, we integrated it with our outage management system. It's not cool when the power goes out, but for me, when the power went out, my parents got a text message that said, "Hey, we noticed your power is out. Please respond, is your power out?" And then we would take that, send over the response to the outage management system to confirm the power outage or things like that. And then on the inverse, when the power came back on, we recognized that, sent it out. And, this was impacting thousands and thousands of members. And I just thought that was so cool how we were able to do that within a low code platform. Another example I worked on recently, we had a team come in. It was our software audit team, and their whole job is just making sure that everybody has the correct permissions, and they do like quarterly audits, annual audits, depending on the application. But, I met with this guy and he's like, it takes me like 3-4 weeks to audit these 12 programs for these 4,000 users. And, we met with him, learned his workflow a little bit, and I sat down for a couple weeks and developed this low code application for him. And I mean, instead of spending 3 weeks doing this, we got it down to like 2 hours. And I don't know what he does for the rest of his time now, probably just hanging around. But, essentially we integrated with Active Directory, pulled in a lot of permissions there. We built like a custom import thing so he can upload permissions that were exported from things like Salesforce. But yeah, he basically within 10 clicks, he's able to email out all the approvers, all the managers for the employees. And then we build a custom form where they just click it, they fill in the permissions, say, yes, this is good, or no, this needs to be removed. And it's pretty much taken all of the manual work out of it, aside from just probably, an hour or two upfront work to get the data into it. So not flashy necessarily, but, both of those projects I think had a huge impact. And I just thought that was really cool how we were able to take something that was a lot of manual work or something we would have had to pay another company to do and do it internally. I just think that's awesome.
That's one thing with people that are like developing software. I've always been a little jealous of, like if you're doing woodworking or if you make something, like you're just like so proud of what you've done. And, I
Yeah.
think coders, people that do code and build stuff, like I'm sure that's, something you're very proud of some of the things you've accomplished. Just thinking about that, like I know you're doing the low code stuff, but you also have to be like a really good listener, I would imagine, and have to learn these processes. Like, I guess I'm just kind of curious, like, how much time are you spending doing the low code versus just trying to understand, these long, complicated processes to even be able to code them? Like, how much time do you think you spend just learning the processes?
Yeah, so I mean, like that part of it, I don't think that changes. It shouldn't change at all from traditional development. At the end of the day, whether you're doing low code or traditional development, you need to fully understand a business process before you start trying to develop it. It's probably 50-50. You might spend 3 weeks talking to stakeholders, gathering requirements, putting it into Jira, creating tickets, things like that. And then because of low code, you can knock it out in another 3 weeks. If you're doing traditional development, it might take you 3 months, 6 months to get that knocked out. So but you're right. It's like that part of it doesn't go away. Just because it's low code doesn't mean you don't have to fully understand the process and do that upfront work because if you don't do the upfront work, you'll basically get 50% done and realize, oh no, this requirement changes the entire project. I have to go back and redo a lot of this stuff. And I've ran into that a few times and learned my lesson there. So it's definitely important to understand the process, to work with your stakeholders, and just fully gather those requirements before you start any kind of development.
All right, let's take a quick break here. If you're enjoying what you're hearing so far, make sure you're following us so you never miss an episode. You can follow right here, wherever you're listening. You can follow us on YouTube if you prefer to watch, and also our social media channels. And as we've told you many times before, we love to hear from you, whether that's on social media or directly. So please reach out and help us make the show better. Now let's get back at it. So I think you kind of maybe talked about this a little bit, Adam, with those two projects, but I know you kinda got into low code and you were kinda doing, like, smaller projects and larger projects, but is there kind of a point or, like, a particular time when it clicked that low code is actually something that a serious enterprise is gonna use? It's a tool to really transform a business. Was there anything that really set that off, that really changed that perspective in your mind?
I'd say like when you get that first successful project done and, that stakeholder is excited and they're like, "Oh, this is saving me so much time." And then that kind of spreads throughout the company, I think. Like when one department head sees what another department is doing with that low code platform and they start spinning ideas in their head like, "Oh, this is going to be useful to me as well. Let me meet with them and see what I can get done." I think if the tool is solving business problems, then it's an enterprise tool in terms of its use at least.
Anthony, I know we were talking kinda pre-show, and you were talking about that very thing, that kind of momentum, like the rock rolling down a hill that you've seen in your environment. You wanna, like, maybe talk a little bit about that and kinda how you saw people getting really, really excited once you were able to make successful projects?
So yeah, we did a demo of Salesforce, and it was one of those things when I saw it, I was like, man, I can't believe I never looked at this before. And I know I didn't look at it; it was just the name. I was like, what's Salesforce got to do with electric co-op? I was like, how can it? It's never going to help us. But after seeing a demo and that coupled with a forms tool, I was like, man, we could modernize all these antiquated processes we have. And like I was just ecstatic as soon as I saw it. I was like, man, we're gonna be able to do so much with this. And Earl Moore, he's in our department, and this man loves him some Salesforce. So let me tell you that he hit the ground running with it. And we were brainstorming. I was like, we need to do a project that touches a lot of people, touches all the departments, so they can see the power of it and what we can do. And so we did the vehicle inspection, and there's a lot of people that touches at an electric co-op. And I remember we got told up front that it was not gonna be a successful project. You got the folks, like, wanna do it on paper, and it's just hard to do it electronically. There's too many things to check and stuff like that. We were constantly meeting with the stakeholders and getting their input, stuff like that. And, man, when we went go live with that, it was a hit. There were hardly any hiccups or snags. I mean, obviously, we found some things, but, like, just the positivity of the people doing it, and
Yeah.
if we were to pull that now, like, they would scream, or, like, "There's no way we're, like, going back to paper." And so, anyways, like, we did that, and now it got a little momentum after that, but, like, by the time we got the 2nd, 3rd process revamp with that, now we got people beating down our doors, and we got a line, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I was just curious what drew you to Salesforce because I recently got certified in Salesforce. I think it's awesome. I think you can do a whole lot in it, but I don't think it's cheap. And I'm
No.
curious, is Salesforce if it fits your need, then awesome. I wonder, is it more than you need, or do you think it's exactly what you need?
Yeah, no, that's what, like, so just the vehicle inspection, there's no way that, we could have bought a vehicle inspection tool for way cheaper than what we paid for the licensing. But now,
Mhm.
like, with all of the stuff that we have in it now, like, I feel like we're doing better than what we're paying for it. And for the most part, I don't see us really growing in licensing anymore. So everything we
Yeah.
add on top of it, is kind of just making it more of a value for us. But honestly, it was Andy Shepard who worked at Jones Onslow, him and Adam Dingus, who's now working, or I forget his title at Futura. He just got promoted. Basically, he's running Futura. So they did a contractor portal. And honestly, like that process didn't really align with our needs. But just seeing the tool and what it could do, it was just easy to visualize all the things that it could do just from seeing that demo. I'm sure there's other tools out there that are cheaper that could do quite a bit or even more than it. But one of the part is where our core system with Meridian, they're working on integration with Salesforce. And that's really the big ticket with us is just having that integration into those systems.
Yeah, I was curious if you guys were gonna use any of the actual CRM aspects of it. So it sounds like you probably
Mhm.
will in the future if you're not already. So that makes sense then. I think just for like low code stuff, maybe it's not the best tool, but if you plan to fully utilize a lot of it, then I think it's an awesome tool. I loved it when I was working in it. It's great. So very cool.
A lot of people don't realize that if when you have a low code platform, when you continue to build modules on top of that, typically, at least in our case, there's no extra cost there. So, like, whenever let's say we've automated, I don't know, we're probably at 100 processes plus now. But let's say we automated 100 and we want to do another 25, we're not paying extra to do that. So, the cost proposition really gets better as you go with that.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you guys, is there anything more motivating than telling you you're not going to be able to do something or it's not going to go well? If you want to motivate an IT guy, just tell him he can't do it. So, you talked a little bit about skill set, and I know we're focusing on low code, but I think that you mentioned really like when traditional coding, what kind of skill sets typically involve degree program for like a low code or maybe even to the no code. What kind of skill set does someone need? Anthony mentioned, obviously the listening skills, the understanding problem solving, but from a technical perspective, what kind of skills do you feel like is needed for someone to really like kind of jump into this?
Yeah. I mean, it is low code, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that you can have zero technical skills. With that being said, though, I think the bar for learning those skills is a lot lower. As far as like what technical skills are probably at least nice to have starting out would be, familiarity with the database, being able to at least understand how to create not necessarily database tables, but understand how data works. If I'm creating Anthony, like you said, a vehicle inspection application, well, what kind of fields am I going to need for that application? How are those going to potentially relate to other sets of fields? Maybe we have a field for vehicles and then we have one for locations and we have to relate those somehow, things like that. A familiarity with databases or at least the understanding of how data should be structured somewhat is a big one. And then also REST APIs. The big cool thing about local platforms is that you can integrate really easily with other platforms within your business. So I think that's also a big one. Knowing how to take an API key, connect up to the API, and then knowing what endpoints to hit and things like that. I would say that's fairly necessary unless you're just doing really basic stuff. More so than the technical skills, I think the soft skills are probably where you really need to find that right person. So you need somebody that's curious, somebody that's detail oriented, that likes to solve problems. If you get that person and drop them in a low code platform, they're probably going to have a fun time. You
Mm.
can learn how to create database tables and work with REST APIs within probably like a few days if you really sit down and try to do it. But it's the person that's really curious and it's going to want to solve that business problem. I think they will definitely excel whether or not they have a huge set of technical skills.
Man, IT people with people skills, that's a scary combo.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. You kind of eliminated all of IT, right? No, I'm kidding.
But you're right though. You need the technical skills, but I think generally, especially for a small to medium company, you're not going to have 10 developers. You're not going to have a business analyst dedicated to just low code. You need somebody that can talk to somebody, extract the business requirements, and then go in there and actually do the development in the platform. So that might be a unique person out there that's not as easy to find. Or maybe find somebody that is already good at the business requirement stuff that doesn't have a lot of technical skills, and then let them learn the technical skills because they're not that far out of reach. You can spend maybe a week learning how databases work, take a beginner class on REST APIs, and I think you'd have a pretty good understanding of how to utilize it.
I am just curious because you didn't cover it in your background, but did you have a computer science degree or did you have like an information technology degree?
But yeah, so I had a information technology degree. Um,
Okay.
Looking back, I wish I had gone the computer science route, but you work with what you got. So I think I kind of fit the that low code area because I'm not super technical in terms of like programming and things like that. But I do think that I understand a business well enough to go and ask the correct questions and things like that. Yeah, no, I definitely don't have a computer science degree.
Yeah. I think it might be easier to find someone that has good soft skills and go that way than the reverse. Sometimes the really technical people, like that soft skills is what they really struggle with. You've mentioned a couple platforms as we've been talking tonight, and I was kind of put you on the spot a little bit. Let's just say you got dropped into a company, we'll just call it Company X, and there was no established low code platforms. What would you use? Let's say maybe if you had a small budget, medium sized budget, large budget, what tools would you pick to actually build out that low code platform inside their environment?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're a two-person company, you got a small budget, I would go with probably 2 platforms. One would be NAN, which is basically just an automation platform. You drag and drop these little nodes onto a canvas and they do lots of cool stuff. The thing about that platform is there's no user interface really. You can create simple forms and things like that, but it's generally just for automating things that you would back in. So if you want to take data from this database, transform it a little bit, and then shove it into another database, that's a really cool tool to use. And the nice thing about it, it's also open source. So you can host it yourself completely free. For the actual low code platform where you would build out user portals and things like that, I would probably look at like Buddybase, maybe AppSmith. Buddybase is BUDI base. Every time I start a project or I'm working with a client that has a small business, that's typically what I just go to. I enjoy working in it. They have a really active community, lots of like templates and things to get you started. And they definitely fit that low code bill because you're able to, use JavaScript and things like that. And if you run into something where you can't automate it with their built-in tools, you have the ability to use some code to kind of supplement that, which is nice. In medium-sized businesses, I would probably stick with Buddybase still. The price per user, I think it's like $5 a user or something. So it's not going to break the bank if you have like 100 users. And then as you get into the larger businesses, they have platforms like Salesforce, OutSystems, Appian. I think those are all pretty reputable, but also pretty pricey. Those platforms can pretty much do anything you throw at them, and they're very well established, mature platforms as far as security and things like that. I don't think you could do a lot better. One negative, since we're talking about choosing platforms, is the kind of the platform lock-in. I mean, I would say it might be one of the worst things about low code is that you find this platform, you love it, you build out 1,000 processes on it, and then for some reason something better comes along and you go, "Oh, well, this is great, but now I have to either stick with what I have, even if I don't like the direction they're going, or I have to start trying to transfer these processes that I've built to another platform." The platform that I currently work on, I'm not a huge fan of it. If we were to switch to something else, it would probably take years to transfer everything off of it and rebuild it or something, and that's just tough.
That's funny you mentioned that because I was actually going to follow up with that question. I see that as a disadvantage as well. Honestly, I'm not sure that just moving stuff over for us is ever going to be an actual solution. I think we would probably just start with new processes in the different platform, kind of maintain the old processes. And then as they became a pain point in the old platform, we would do that. But yeah, that is the tough thing I think about low code. You do kind of get locked in. And honestly, it's not just low code. I mean, if you're going to do any of the cloud platforms, there's a certain amount of lock in if you go with AWS or Azure or something like that. And it's just really for these companies, they kind of want to do that, right? I mean, they want to keep you on their platform. That is tough. And would you suggest, Adam, if you're just getting started, to maybe try a few? Don't go too far down the rabbit hole with any one platform before you
Yeah.
figure out which one maybe best meets your needs.
Yeah, because, if you search up low code, you're going to find 20 different platforms. You'll see Buddybase, you'll see Airtable, you'll see Salesforce, but almost all of these platforms have some kind of free offering. So I would say take a simple process and go to each platform and build it out. Once you build it in that first platform, it shouldn't take very long to build it out in additional platforms. And then, as you're developing it, be like, oh, do you like this? Is it better than the old one? Is it easier? Is it faster? And then you'd want to look at cost and things like that.
Yeah.
All of these platforms have some kind of free offering where you can log in and at least do a little bit of work. You should try it out before you buy it. So,
I'm excited to hear you mention N8N. We just rolled it out. Now, we haven't got the first work process or AI agent rolled out, but we're super excited. I'm hoping I can automate myself out of a job.
yeah, that's kind of for me, that's like a tried and true. I mentioned Buddy Base being one that I like to go to, but I've been running N8N to automate some processes for my sister's small company. And I mean, it's been rock solid for years at this point, and it takes all of 5 seconds to update it. We take some from Airtable, we transform it, and then put it into a Postgres SQL database. It's awesome though. And they have like 1,000 different nodes that you can connect up to pretty much anything. And it's free, which is even cooler.
Yeah. So something we always kind of mention, I mean, some of our episodes obviously are really focused on it, and some of them are not as much, is security. The low code platforms, like, how do you feel? Is it, kind of traditional role based security that you see in these? Are there differences in how they do security? And then how would you suggest someone kind of as they're thinking about maybe rolling out one of these platforms, maybe they find the one they like, they're gonna, push it out, doing a lot of processes with it. How do you suggest maybe them setting up their security kind of structure around that low code platform?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge consideration because to me, the scary thing about a low code platform is you're connecting all of these different data sources. You might have 10 different databases, REST services to all important things and important data. And to me, it's very scary that if somebody was to access that, they could potentially have access from one place to get all this data. It's very scary. So I think you just treat it like a traditional software platform or development, security, and take it very seriously. As far as like access, I mean, you have role based access. Make sure there's groups in least privilege. Users should not be able to access applications within the low code platform. You shouldn't be able to see everything when you log in. Another thing, single sign on, multi factor authentication, take advantage of that. Most platforms offer that now. And as far as working with databases, maybe you lock down the read access to only what that particular user needs. So you create a service account with only certain access. Maybe instead of having free will to just insert data at random, you have stored procedures and things like that to kind of lock down how you can insert data. But yeah, where I work currently, I'm required to take the same security courses that the traditional developers take. So we review all the OWASP top 10, things like that. So just because you're doing low code doesn't mean that you shouldn't take security very seriously. You definitely need to be very careful about who can access it, who can do what, things like that. I think these companies, especially over the last few years, most of the time you can go to their website and they'll have like a little security page and they'll tell you everything they're doing to keep your data secure, especially if it's hosted in the cloud, if they're GDPR compliant or whatever. But I think generally, I think the platforms are secure, but you should definitely, if they have some kind of security feature, take advantage of it.
Adam, I'm just curious, how are you staying? You mentioned your company does training for security, but whether it be security or low code, how are you keeping up? How are you learning the latest and greatest?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I really enjoy low code. I think it's fun to go in and develop stuff outside of work. I'm on several subreddits. There's a low code, a no code subreddit. Generally, though, I'm just bouncing around the different applications, seeing what new features are released, following their blogs and things like that. As far as training and things like that, I generally will just, if I have a project that I want to try, I'll try it in a few different platforms, see what new features are released. I'll just keep an eye out on the different blogs and changes. Because the thing about low code is I've yet to find one platform that accomplishes everything. I definitely keep up with what they're releasing to see if they've fixed any pain points I've had in the past and things like that.
Well, it sounds like you're learning by doing, and I don't think there's a better
Mhm.
educator than that.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the best way to learn is to definitely just get in there and start building something.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't at least talk about AI and its impact. How do you see AI's impact on the low code community? And then on these platforms that you've mentioned, are they scrambling to integrate AI modules, for lack of a better word, into their products?
Yeah, so I think the scrambling has already happened. Pretty much every time you go on any of these platforms homepage, it says like AI, AI, build in AI. Generally, I think it's more of the building aspect rather than the integration with sending data to AI and getting something back. What they've done is essentially, I mean, you can type in there like, "Hey, I want you to build a form that is for a vehicle inspection," and then it'll just go do it. It'll create the data structures for you, it'll create the form for you, and then obviously you can go in and kinda tweak it as you see fit. But yeah, I think every single platform that I've looked at recently definitely embraced AI. And what that's used for is just to help the speed. You can describe something and have it build it out in 30 seconds and then spend 5 minutes customizing it to your need. And I could save you hours of time. So I think
Mm.
that's definitely a big, it's going in that direction for sure.
Just curious. Tanner and I had this discussion just a little bit ago about, like if you ask AI a question, like you really need to validate it because it can hallucinate or just give you incorrect information. Well, I thought about this with, you hear the term vibe coding, and I'm like, how do
Oh,
those people validating what they're getting if they don't know coding at all? I guess I'm just curious your take on that. Do you agree that you really need to be validating everything that's coming out of it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny you mentioned that because over the last probably 2 months, I've gone heavy into the vibe coding. I bought the $100 code subscription max or whatever, and I've got it in my VS Code terminal, and I'm in there trying to create a software application. But you bring up a good point though, because I don't know how to code. I know the technical aspects of it for the most part, but when I tell it to build this thing, I don't really know what it's building. So yeah, I think generally, I don't think I would use vibe coding to build out enterprise application for my own company. 'Cause that's scary to do because you don't really know how it's working. I like to think that AI would do a good job and follow best practices for security and things like that, but at the end of the day, maybe not. I think if you take Claude code and give it to an actual software developer, it's going to increase their output 10 times easily. And hopefully they go in, review what it's doing and look over it. But yeah, I think it's a fun thing to do on the side. It's not something that I would generally recommend to actual companies that are worried about security.
I'm sure one day though we're gonna get to the point where we don't need to check it.
Yeah, it's crazy what it can do. I built a database, Postgres database and Supabase, and then they have this model context protocol that kind of lets Claude code look at my database and it fully understands the database and then just kind of builds out the application. It kind of understands the features I'm going for based off of the data and
mm,
things like that. It's really cool. I do think since we're talking about AI, like, I mentioned that JavaScript, things like that, that's useful inside of these low-code platforms. I do think that's probably safe enough to do. If you have some complex logic you're trying to figure out and you need to write JavaScript for it, just ask AI to do it. Obviously, try to look over it, make sure it looks like it's at least doing the correct thing, but I think the risks are pretty low there as far as that's concerned.
all right. So wrapping this up, I kind of wanted to end with this question, Adam. To the listeners or the viewers out there who've heard this podcast, they've thought about it. They're like, I just don't know if I want to get into this, if it's just going to be too much for me. What do you say to those people? What would you kind of leave them with to maybe give them the encouragement to take that first step?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the risks are pretty low. There's no reason, as long as you have somebody on your team that's a little technical, that's curious, that likes to solve problems, maybe they have an hour or two of free time a week, let them sign up for one of these low code platforms. Look around for a quick win process. Maybe somebody's doing a decent amount of manual work and it's a simple process. Go ahead and put that in a platform. Spend a few days developing it, and I think that'll be a quick win that's easy and kind of proves the concept that it is useful to your business and it's not going to come at a super high cost. It gives that person on the team a little boost. If you have a help desk employee who's feeling like they're not being utilized enough, or maybe they feel like they could contribute a little bit more, I think that's a perfect employee to let use one of these low code platforms and maybe tackle a process that's annoying for somebody, a stakeholder to do manually. So I say to them, why not? Give it a go. If you don't like it, don't use it. But there's zero cost and just a little bit of time to try and perfect a process in low code.
That sounds like great advice, and knowing that you started with the help desk and you are where you're at now, I think that's great advice and appreciate that.
Yeah, appreciate it, Adam. We really, really just appreciate you having me on. I've learned a ton throughout the episode. I'm sure Anthony has as well. Even some stuff that I went into with, maybe some preconceived notions that I'm now thinking about through what you've shared with us tonight. So just very, very much appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you guys. It's been fun.
As we mentioned earlier, we always love to hear from listeners or viewers. If you want to, reach out to us. Adam was actually on social media asking us about doing a low code episode, and we said, hey, like, come join us and help us out. And so reach out to us, give us an idea. If you want to hear us talk about something in particular or bring on a certain guest, just let us know on social platforms or directly. You can always email us at show@offthewirepodcast.com. Let us know how you think about that. Until next time, this is Off the Wire.